Halloween is supposed to be fun. Candy, costumes, pumpkins glowing in the dark. But every year, people experience things they can't explain. A stranger appearing in family photos. Voices whispering names from inside corn mazes. Children standing motionless in the rain. And figures hiding behind masks that may not be human at all. Tonight, you're about to hear 8 true Halloween horror stories that left people terrified long after October 31st ended. These stories were shared by real people, and some of them still refuse to celebrate Halloween ever again. So before you turn off the lights, before you open your door tonight, make sure you're alone, because some things only come out on Halloween, and once they see you, they don't always leave. 8 true Halloween horror stories to make your skin crawl. Ponteslamt. Halloween night in 2019 started perfectly for the Carter family. Their neighborhood outside Portland was packed with kids in costumes. Glowing pumpkins lined the sidewalks, and parents crowded the streets holding hot drinks while taking photos of their children. Sarah Carter had spent weeks making costumes for her 2 kids. Her son Mason was dressed as a pirate. Her daughter Lily wore a tiny witch costume with a crooked black hat that kept falling over her eyes. Around 7:30 p.m., Sarah stopped in front of a decorated house covered in fake cobwebs and skeletons hanging from trees. "Stand together," she told the kids while lifting her phone for a picture. The children smiled. Flash. Another photo. Flash. Then they continued trick-or-treating for nearly 2 hours. Nothing felt unusual. At least, not at first. Later that night, after the kids fell asleep in the living room surrounded by candy wrappers, Sarah sat on the couch scrolling through the photos she'd taken. That's when she froze. Behind Mason and Lily, standing near the sidewalk, was a tall figure wearing a black coat and an expressionless white mask. At first she assumed it was another person walking by, but in the next picture, the man was closer, and in the one after that, he was directly behind the children. Sarah's stomach tightened. She called her husband over immediately. "Do you remember seeing this guy?" He stared at the screen for several seconds. No, the strange part wasn't just the mask. It was the way he stood, completely still, arms hanging unnaturally low at his sides, like he was posing with the children. Sarah kept scrolling. The masked man appeared again, and again, and again. Different streets, different houses, always somewhere behind them, watching. In one image, he stood partially hidden behind a tree. In another, he appeared at the far end of the sidewalk. Every time, closer than before. Neither parent remembered seeing him even once. That's when Sarah became truly scared, because whoever this person was, he had been following them all night without being noticed. Her husband checked the front door immediately. Locked. Windows secure. Still, neither of them slept much that night. The next morning, Sarah posted online asking neighbors if anyone recognized the masked man. Within an hour, people started responding. One mother uploaded her own Halloween photos. The same man appeared in the background. Another family checked their Ring camera footage. Again, the masked figure could be seen slowly walking down the street behind groups of children. Never speaking, never approaching, just following. Police eventually reviewed neighborhood security footage. For nearly an hour and a half, cameras captured the masked man, wandering through different streets, sometimes standing motionless at corners for several minutes, sometimes slowly turning toward passing families. But the creepiest footage came from a camera mounted above a garage. At exactly 8:42 p.m., the figure stopped walking entirely, then slowly turned his head upward, directly toward the camera, as if he knew he was being watched. Police were never able to identify him. No costume stores nearby sold the mask. No neighbors recognized the man's height or clothing, and nobody ever reported seeing where he came from or where he went afterward. Eventually, the story faded away, until 3 days later. Sarah was backing up photos from her phone onto her laptop when she noticed one image she somehow missed. The timestamp read 11:48 p.m. Almost 4 hours after trick-or-treating ended. The picture showed her living room. Mason and Lily asleep on the couch beneath the glow of the television. But standing at the end of the hallway, barely visible in the darkness, was the same white mask inside the house. Every October, thousands of people visited the Black Hollow corn maze outside a small town in Ohio. It was famous for being one of the scariest Halloween attractions in the state. Actors dressed as chainsaw killers chased visitors through narrow paths. Hidden speakers played screams in the distance. Fog machines filled the maze with thick smoke after sunset. Most people loved it, but after what happened in 2021, some locals refused to go back. 17-year-old Tyler Brooks went there with 4 friends on the Saturday before Halloween. At first, the night felt normal. They laughed while taking photos near the entrance, bought cheap hot chocolate, mocked each other for getting scared too easily. Around 10 p.m., they entered the maze for the final run before closing. The employee at the gate warned them, jokingly, "Don't get lost in there." The maze stretched across several acres. Tall walls of corn blocked almost all sound from outside. Within minutes, the group became separated from other visitors. The deeper they walked, the quieter everything became. Too quiet. Then Tyler heard it, chains dragging somewhere ahead, slow, metal scraping against dirt. One of the girls laughed nervously. Okay, that actor sounds way too real. But when they rounded the corner, nobody was there. Only empty pathways disappearing into darkness. The dragging sound stopped instantly. They continued walking. That's when they heard screaming. Not playful screaming, real screaming. The kind that sounded panicked. The group stopped moving. Tyler shouted, "Hello?" No response. Then another scream echoed through the maze, much farther away this time. One of his friends pulled out her phone flashlight. I don't think this is part of the attraction. As they moved faster through the maze, strange things kept happening. They passed sections with no decorations, no actors, no music, just silence. At one point, Tyler noticed footprints in the mud beside the path. Bare footprints, as if someone had been walking through the freezing dirt without shoes. Then the chains started again, closer now, dragging behind them. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The group panicked and started running. Cornstalks shook violently nearby as if someone was moving beside them. One friend screamed after seeing a dark figure standing between the rows. But when Tyler flashed his light toward it, nothing was there. Then suddenly, Ethan disappeared. 1 second he was running beside them. The next, gone. The group started yelling his name repeatedly. No answer. Only wind moving through the corn. For nearly 10 minutes, they searched in circles before finally hearing footsteps approaching slowly from the darkness. Ethan emerged pale and trembling. His hoodie was muddy, his eyes unfocused. "Where were you?" Tyler shouted. But Ethan barely answered. "I thought you guys left me." The strange thing was, none of them had seen him leave, and Ethan refused to explain what happened. When they finally escaped the maze, employees looked confused by their story. There were no actors carrying chains that night, and nobody else reported screaming. One worker even insisted that entire section of the maze had been closed because of damaged pathways. But Tyler knew they had walked through it. All 5 of them remembered it clearly. After that night, Ethan changed. He stopped answering calls, quit going out with friends, barely spoke at school anymore. Then, nearly a week later, Tyler finally confronted him. What happened in that maze? Ethan sat silently for a long time before speaking. "I got lost after we started running," he whispered. "At first I thought you guys were ahead of me. Then I heard someone walking behind me." Tyler felt cold listening. Ethan continued staring at the floor. "I thought it was one of the actors, until he said my name." Tyler frowned. "What?" Ethan looked up slowly. He whispered my full name. Silence filled the room. "Not just Ethan," he said shakily. "He said my first, middle, and last name." Tyler tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone overheard them earlier. Maybe it was a prank. But Ethan shook his head immediately. "There's more." He swallowed hard. When I turned around, there was nobody there. Halloween night in the town of Briarwood was miserable. Cold rain poured non-stop. Wind rattled dead leaves across empty streets. Most families finished trick-or-treating early and hurried back inside before the storm got worse. But around 9 p.m., Melissa Harper still sat near the front door, handing out candy to the few children brave enough to stay outside. That's when she saw the child for the first time. A small figure stood silently at the edge of her driveway beneath the streetlight. The kid wore a faded black raincoat and an old doll mask with cracked porcelain cheeks and hollow eye holes. Melissa smiled politely. "Well, come get some candy." The child didn't move. Rain poured over the motionless figure. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, the child walked slowly toward the porch. No trick-or-treat bag. No parents nearby. No umbrella. Something already felt wrong. When the child reached the porch, Melissa held out a handful of candy. The kid simply stared at her through the cracked doll mask, then turned around and walked away without taking anything. Melissa watched in confusion. Okay, weird. An hour later, she nearly dropped her tea when the doorbell rang again. The same child stood there, completely still. Rainwater dripped from the mask onto the porch floor. Melissa forced a laugh. "You came back." No answer. The child didn't even move. This time Melissa noticed something unsettling. The mask looked old, very old, not like a cheap Halloween costume. The porcelain surface was yellowed with age, and tiny cracks spread across the face like broken glass. The eyes behind the mask looked completely black. Melissa suddenly felt uncomfortable. "Where are your parents?" Silence. Then slowly, the child tilted its head sideways. Melissa felt goosebumps rise across her arms. She quickly placed candy into the child's hand and shut the door. But through the frosted glass beside the entrance, she could still see the figure standing there. Not leaving, just staring into the house. Melissa locked the deadbolt. 10 minutes passed. The child remained outside, motionless in the rain. Finally, Melissa's husband Daniel came downstairs. "What's wrong with you?" "There's a kid outside who's acting strange." Daniel peeked through the window. The porch was empty. Relieved, Melissa laughed nervously. Maybe they finally left. Then the back door creaked open. Both of them froze. Daniel walked carefully toward the kitchen. The backyard was dark except for weak light spilling from the house. Rain hammered against the fence. Nobody was there. But muddy footprints stretched across the patio. Small footprints. Like a child had walked around the back of the house. Daniel immediately locked the door. "Probably just some teenagers messing around," he muttered. Still, Melissa couldn't relax. Near midnight, the storm finally began dying down. The streets outside became completely empty. Melissa started collecting leftover candy bowls from the porch when she noticed something sitting near the front steps. A small porcelain doll. Its face matched the cracked mask exactly. She picked it up carefully. The doll was freezing cold. Attached to it was a soaked piece of paper. Written in shaky handwriting were 4 words. "Thank you for letting me in." Melissa's stomach dropped instantly. She and Daniel searched the entire house. Closets, basement, garage, nothing. The next morning, Melissa contacted local police and described the child. Officers went door to door asking neighbors if anyone recognized the costume. Nobody did. But one older officer became strangely quiet while listening. Finally, he asked Melissa to describe the doll mask again. Cracked porcelain, black eyes, yellowed face. The officer slowly nodded, then told her something that made her blood run cold. Nearly 20 years earlier, during another Halloween storm, a little girl named Emily Voss disappeared while trick-or-treating nearby. She had been wearing a porcelain doll costume. Her body was never found. Tront. In October 2022, a group of college students near northern Pennsylvania planned what they called the biggest Halloween party of the year. No parents, no police. Just bonfires, alcohol, loud music, and dozens of people partying deep inside the woods outside campus. Everyone was told to meet at an abandoned logging trail around 10 p.m. By midnight, nearly 50 students crowded around the fire. People danced in costumes beneath hanging lanterns tied to trees. Music echoed through the forest. Beer bottles covered folding tables near parked trucks. For a while the night felt perfect. Then Ashley noticed the man in the animal mask. He stood between the trees beyond the firelight, completely still. The mask looked handmade from rotting deerskin and antlers. At first, Ashley assumed it was another student trying to scare people. But after 20 minutes, the figure still hadn't moved. Not once. She pointed him out to her friend Nina. "You know that guy?" Nina looked toward the woods. Probably just some creep. But something about the way the figure watched them felt wrong. No phone, no drink, no costume besides the mask. Just standing there silently in darkness. As the night continued, more people started noticing him. A few students even shouted jokes toward the trees. The figure never reacted. Around 1 a.m., Ashley went to find her friend Claire, who had wandered off after an argument with her boyfriend. She checked near the parked cars first. Nothing. Then she heard footsteps crunching deeper in the woods. Claire? No answer. Only distant music from the party. Ashley followed the sound carefully with her phone flashlight. Branches snapped somewhere ahead. Then suddenly, a scream tore through the forest. Ashley froze. "Claire?" The scream cut off instantly. Ashley sprinted back toward the bonfire, screaming for help. Within minutes, nearly everyone at the party spread through the woods searching. Phones flashed through darkness. People shouted Claire's name repeatedly. But the deeper they searched, the stranger things became. Several students claimed they saw someone moving between trees. Others reported hearing breathing nearby. One guy swore he saw the animal mask figure standing directly behind him before disappearing again. Then Ashley found Claire's phone. It lay face up beside a muddy trail nearly half a mile from the party. The screen was cracked, but still recording video. Police arrived shortly afterward and collected the phone as evidence. Claire was nowhere to be found. Not that night. Not the next morning. Search dogs tracked her scent deep into the forest before suddenly losing it near a narrow creek. It was as if she had vanished completely. Days later, investigators reviewed the final recording from Claire's phone. Most of it showed darkness bouncing wildly as she ran, heavy breathing, branches snapping, footsteps pounding behind her. Then Claire whispered something terrified into the camera. "He's following me." The footsteps behind her became faster, closer. Claire started crying. "Please stop." Then, for a split second, the camera pointed backward. Investigators later confirmed the frame captured a tall figure sprinting between the trees, wearing the same animal mask seen at the party. Claire screamed. The video ended seconds later, but the detail that truly horrified police came from the audio near the end, because just before the recording stopped, another voice could be heard whispering from extremely close behind her, a voice that calmly said, "Found you." 16-year-old Ryan Mercer hated Halloween, not because he was scared of horror movies or haunted houses, but because of the basement. His family lived in a 100-year-old farmhouse in Vermont that had belonged to his grandparents for decades. The basement was ancient, dirt floor, stone walls, one weak pull-chain light hanging from the ceiling. Ryan avoided it whenever possible. But 2 days before Halloween, his mother asked him to go downstairs and look for old decorations stored in boxes near the back wall. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and reluctantly headed down. The basement smelled damp and rotten. Cobwebs stretched across low wooden beams overhead, and every step made the stairs creak loudly behind him. Near the far corner, he found several dusty boxes stacked beside an old wardrobe cabinet. Most were filled with broken decorations, fake pumpkins, burned candles, old costumes. Then Ryan opened the wardrobe. Inside hung a clown costume. Not a normal clown costume. This thing looked ancient. The faded fabric was stained dark brown around the sleeves and chest. Its grin was stitched unevenly across the mask. One eye socket appeared larger than the other. Worst of all, it smelled horrible, like mold and something rotten underneath it. Ryan immediately slammed the door shut, but something about the costume bothered him all evening. Later that night, he jokingly told his friends about it during a group call. One friend laughed. "You should wear it for Halloween." Ryan refused instantly. But the next afternoon, curiosity got the better of him. He went back downstairs and tried the costume on. The fabric felt strangely damp against his skin. The mask barely fit over his face, but when he looked in the mirror hanging beside the wardrobe, he barely recognized himself. The clown looked wrong. Not funny, not theatrical, just disturbing. Ryan took a quick photo to send his friends, then immediately removed it. That night, strange things started happening. Around 2 a.m., Ryan woke to footsteps moving slowly across the hallway outside his room. He assumed it was his father, but the footsteps sounded uneven, dragging slightly. Step drag, step drag. Then they stopped directly outside his bedroom door. Ryan waited. Silence. Finally, he opened the door. The hallway was empty. The next morning, Ryan found muddy footprints leading from the basement stairs into the kitchen. His parents blamed the dog. But Ryan knew the prints looked almost human. That evening, he went downstairs to throw the clown costume away. The wardrobe stood open, empty. Ryan felt panic hit instantly. He searched the basement carefully. Nothing. Then he heard movement upstairs. Fast footsteps crossing the second floor. Ryan ran up immediately. His little sister Emma stood frozen near the bathroom. "Someone was in your room," she whispered. Ryan shoved open his bedroom door. The clown costume sat upright in his desk chair facing the doorway. The mask grinned directly at him. Ryan felt sick. His father accused him of playing pranks and stuffed the costume into a garbage bag before throwing it outside into the trash bin. Problem solved. At least that's what they thought. Around 3 a.m., Ryan woke again, this time to breathing, slow breathing, inside his room. He sat up carefully. Darkness filled the corners of the bedroom. Then lightning flashed through the window. For one split second, the entire room lit up bright white, and Ryan saw it. The clown costume standing beside his bed, empty but upright, as if someone invisible was wearing it. Another flash of lightning hit. This time, the costume was closer. Destrent, every town has that one house. The place kids dare each other to visit. The place adults avoid talking about. The place surrounded by stories nobody can fully explain. In the town of Ashwood, that house sat at the very end of Maple Street. Small, white paint peeling from the walls. Dead flowers hanging from rusted pots on the porch. People claimed an old woman once lived there alone for decades. And every Halloween night, strange things happened around the property. Lights turned on inside, despite the electricity being disconnected. Children reported hearing whispering near the windows. Some even claimed they saw someone standing behind the curtains watching the street. Most locals ignored the stories, but teenagers loved turning the house into a Halloween challenge. Knock on the front door, wait 30 seconds, then run. Whoever lasted longest earned bragging rights for the year. 17-year-old Caleb Turner thought the whole thing was stupid. So on Halloween night in 2023, after hearing his friends constantly talk about it, he finally agreed to do the challenge himself. Around 11 p.m., 4 teenagers walked down Maple Street beneath flickering orange streetlights. The farther they walked, the quieter the neighborhood became. No trick-or-treaters, no cars, not even dogs barking. Only wind moving through dead leaves. Then they saw the house. Every light around it was dark except for a faint yellow glow coming from the upstairs window. Caleb laughed nervously. Probably squatters. His friends stayed near the sidewalk while Caleb walked up the cracked stone path alone. The porch creaked beneath his feet. He raised his hand and knocked. Nothing happened. The boys behind him shouted for him to hurry up. Then suddenly, the door opened. An elderly woman stood there smiling. Caleb nearly jumped backward. She looked impossibly pale beneath the porch light. Grey hair hung thin around her shoulders, and her eyes looked cloudy, almost colorless. But her smile never moved. "Well," she said softly, "aren't you going to come inside?" Caleb forced an awkward laugh. "No thanks. Just doing a dare." The woman tilted her head slightly. "You should still come in. It's cold tonight." Something about her voice felt wrong. Too calm. Too empty. Caleb glanced back toward his friends. They looked equally uncomfortable now. Trying to be polite, Caleb stepped just inside the doorway for a second. The smell hit him immediately. Dust, rot, old wood. The inside of the house looked abandoned. Furniture covered in sheets. Wallpaper peeling from walls. A grandfather clock standing motionless in the hallway. And yet, everything was perfectly silent. No television, no footsteps, nothing. The old woman continued smiling from the doorway behind him. "You're the first visitor I've had in years," she whispered. Caleb suddenly wanted to leave. Fast. "Well, happy Halloween," he muttered before stepping back outside. The woman nodded slowly, then said something that made his stomach tighten. "Be careful walking home tonight." Before Caleb could answer, the front door slammed shut. The porch light went dark instantly. His friends immediately started laughing nervously while hurrying away from the property. But Caleb couldn't stop looking back at the upstairs window. He swore he saw the woman standing there watching them leave. The next morning, Caleb told his older brother about the encounter. At first, his brother thought it was hilarious, until Caleb described the woman. The smile, the grey hair, the cloudy eyes. His brother's expression changed immediately. Without saying a word, he pulled out his phone and searched for something online. Then handed the screen to Caleb. It was an old newspaper article from 2011. The headline read, "Elderly woman found dead alone inside Maple Street home on Halloween night." Below the headline was a photograph, the woman from the house, still smiling. Every Halloween season, Hollow Creek Costume Shop became packed with customers looking for cheap masks and decorations. Fake blood covered the walls. Animatronic monsters screamed near the entrance. Rows of creepy costumes hung from the ceiling beneath flickering orange lights. For 22-year-old employee Marcus Reed, it was exhausting, especially closing shifts. By the week before Halloween, the store stayed open past midnight, and Marcus often closed alone after the last customers left. That's when things started happening. It began with one mask, an old pale face with stretched black eyes and a twisted smile. The mask hung near the back of the store beside several mannequins dressed in vintage costumes. Marcus hated walking past it. Something about it looked too realistic. Its expression felt almost human. One night, around 12:30 a.m., Marcus finished locking the entrance doors and started cleaning the aisles. Music played quietly through overhead speakers while rain tapped against the windows outside. Everything felt normal, until he noticed the mask facing a different direction. Earlier, it had been angled toward the aisle. Now it faced directly toward the register counter where Marcus stood. He frowned. Probably a customer bumped it. Marcus walked over and adjusted the mask back into place before continuing work. 10 minutes later, the store lights flickered briefly. At the same moment, a loud crash echoed from the back room. Marcus jumped. Hello? No answer. He grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the sound carefully. The storage room looked empty, but several costume boxes had fallen onto the floor. As Marcus bent down to pick them up, he heard something else. Footsteps. Slow footsteps moving across the sales floor outside the room. Marcus immediately stepped back into the aisle. Nobody was there. The store remained completely empty. Then he froze. The pale mask was facing him again. This time its head tilted slightly sideways. Marcus stared at it for several seconds before forcing himself to laugh nervously. Okay, not funny. He checked the front entrance. Still locked. No customers inside. Trying to calm himself, Marcus returned to closing duties. But over the next hour, things became worse. Mannequins appeared repositioned between aisles. A shelf of candy suddenly crashed to the floor. The motion sensor near the hallway triggered repeatedly despite nobody walking there. At one point, Marcus clearly heard whispering near the costume racks. Soft, unintelligible, like multiple voices speaking at once. Finally, around 1:15 a.m., the power shut off completely. Darkness swallowed the store instantly. Marcus cursed under his breath and turned on his phone flashlight. The emergency lights failed to activate. Only silence filled the building. Then came the sound, tap, 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 someone walking slowly toward him through the darkness. Marcus backed toward the register counter, breathing hard. Who's there? No answer. The footsteps continued. Closer. Tap, tap, tap. Marcus swung the flashlight toward the aisle. Nothing. But when he turned back toward the register, the pale mask was no longer hanging on the wall. Marcus felt panic explode through his chest. Then the security alarm suddenly activated. Bright emergency lights flashed red across the store. And for one horrifying second, Marcus saw every mannequin in the store facing directly toward him. He sprinted outside immediately and called police. Officers searched the building. Nobody was found inside. No signs of forced entry. No missing merchandise. But when Marcus demanded they check the security footage, the officers became strangely quiet. The camera recording from 1:14 a.m. showed Marcus standing alone near the register. Then, in the background, the pale mask slowly turned by itself. Seconds later, the mannequin wearing it stepped down from the display platform and walked out of frame. By the time Halloween night finally ended, the Reynolds family was exhausted. The neighborhood had been crowded for hours with screaming children, flashing decorations, and non-stop doorbell ringing. But just after midnight, the streets outside became completely silent. No more trick-or-treaters, no cars, only cold wind moving through fallen leaves. David Reynolds dumped the last handful of candy wrappers into the trash, while his wife Emily turned off the porch decorations. Finally over, David sighed. Their 2 kids were already asleep upstairs. After spending the night dressed as superheroes, the house felt peaceful again. Then the doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Emily looked toward the clock. 12:17 a.m. That's weird, she whispered. David frowned. No kids still out this late. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time. Ding. Doom. David walked toward the front door slowly while Emily stayed near the kitchen watching nervously. The porch light illuminated the frosted glass beside the entrance. A small figure stood outside. probably a child. David unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door halfway. A kid wearing a black costume stood motionless on the porch. No mask, just darkness beneath the hood. David couldn't even make out a face. "You're a little late for candy, buddy." The child didn't move, didn't speak. Cold wind pushed dead leaves across the porch between them. Then finally, in a low, distorted voice, the child asked, "Can I come inside now?" David felt immediate unease. Something about the voice sounded wrong. Not robotic, not electronic, almost layered. Like several voices speaking together, David forced a small laugh. "Sorry, Halloween's over." The figure tilted its head slowly, then repeated the question. "Can I come inside now?" Emily stepped closer behind David. "Close the door." David nodded slightly, but before shutting it, he noticed something strange. The child wasn't breathing. No fog from the cold air. No visible face beneath the hood. Only darkness. David shut the door firmly and locked it. The family stood silently for several seconds listening. Nothing. No footsteps leaving the porch. No movement outside. Then came scratching. Soft scratching against the front door. Emily grabbed David's arm tightly. The scratching continued for nearly a minute, then suddenly stopped. David finally worked up the courage to check outside through the window beside the door. The porch was empty. Relieved, he opened the door carefully. Nobody there, just wind, and one thing sitting directly in the center of the porch, a small black pumpkin bucket. David picked it up slowly. Inside was a single photograph. The image showed the Reynolds family standing in their front yard earlier that evening. The kids smiling in costume, Emily holding candy bowls. But in the upstairs window of the house, someone else stood inside, watching them. A tall, dark figure with no face. Emily immediately called police. Officers searched the neighborhood but found nobody walking nearby. No children, no pranksters, nothing. One officer asked if the family had security cameras. David nodded and pulled up footage from the porch camera on his phone. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the doorbell rang. The family watched the recording carefully. The front porch appeared completely empty. No child stood there. No figure in black. Nothing at all. But then the audio played. And through the phone speaker, they heard the same distorted voice clearly whisper, "Can I come inside now? Drunt!" Halloween is supposed to be about costumes, candy, and harmless scares. But for the people in these stories, what happened that night felt far too real. A masked man appearing inside family photos, voices whispering names from dark cornfields, a child who vanished decades ago returning to someone's porch, and something invisible asking to come inside after midnight. Maybe they were pranks, maybe coincidences, or maybe Halloween really is the one night when strange things walk among us unnoticed. So tonight, before you go to sleep, check your windows, lock your doors, and if someone knocks after midnight, you might not want to answer. Which story disturbed you the most? And have you ever experienced something terrifying on Halloween night? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed these true horror stories, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more terrifying stories every week. And remember, some Halloween visitors never leave.